Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Run with Tobe podcast. After a super long break, we are finally back in the studio recording. We've got a lot of episodes in the works right now. And on this particular episode, I sit down with Kalen, who was a guest early on. She's one of our lead team members. Her and I sit down and talk about all of the things that it takes to run an agency when it comes to process and the tools you need to use, like software, the best way to think about it, all the trials and tribulations that we actually went through at Tobe Agency as we were trying these different tools. It's a really cool episode. We chatted it up for about an hour, kind of got nerded out, and talked a lot about the technology that runs Tobe Agency on the back end. So if you guys are interested, make sure you check this episode out. You'll want to stay for the full episode. And like always, guys, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and send us a message if you like what you're hearing. Thanks for tuning in. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Run with Tobe podcast. For those of you who are familiar with us, welcome back again. If you're not familiar and this is your first time, hello to everybody out there. Just to give you guys an update, if you have joined us before or if this is your first time, Run with Tobe is an open format podcast that we produce here at Tobe Agency, but we focus on agency life, tech, creative, company culture, and everything kind of in between. And we have occasional guests like today. Actually, you are a recast. I don't know how to repeat cast. Yeah. So for anybody out there who doesn't know who Kalen is one of the core members of Tobe Agency. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, yay. I'll insert some claps. I'm just kidding. No, just to give you a little intro on Kalen. So Kalen is our, on paper, I guess they call you, right? We call you our content strategist. You're like the main content strategist at Tobe, so you help all of our clients, obviously, and including Tobe as a client. We kind of treat ourselves as a client, come up with the strategy for all of our marketing efforts. But you also wear a lot of hats under our agency, being that we're still a startup agency. You know, all of us kind of wear multiple hats. And anything that has to do kind of with running and operating and processing the agency, you kind of help lead and head the charge on that. So that's what we want to talk about today, is all of the processes. We've gone through quite a few changes since you were last on the podcast, which was like, I don't know, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, something like that, right?
Almost 2 years. I think it'd be 2 years this December.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? So we've gone through a lot of changes internally. Obviously, as we're growing, we're learning new stuff. We're trying to implement more processes. And I really want to kind of dive into the nerdy side of it and make it a little bit more about the techie part of it. And also the thought process on how you and Andrew, for that matter, you guys kind of mapped a lot of this out. I kind of just sit on the sideline and wait for you guys to call my name. And then I may put in my 2 cents or not. And obviously we've done this for the creative side, but but the more important part is cutting down on the high volume repetition that happens in any business in general, but just in an agency. A lot of our clients, obviously, we're doing a lot of similar type tasks and processes for. So that's kind of what I want to get into today. But before we do that, welcome to LA.
Thank you. I'm excited. It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've been here. The weather sucks right now.
It's not what I expected. I got off the plane and I was like, wait, am I still in Boston?
Yeah, we're in the beginning of June when we're recording this, and the weather is not pleasant. June gloom, as they call it, but it seems like it's been kind of gloomy the last couple of months. I don't know what's going on, LA. Get it together.
Yep.
Yeah, but welcome back to LA. Welcome back to the home office. You work off-site for most of the time with us. And we're actually going to talk about that in another podcast, which I'm excited about. But what's up? Like, what's been going on? Give us a little insight on Kalen.
Let's see. I am excited to be back. Before, I was probably in LA every couple months.
Yep.
So
seemed like every 3 to 6 months, something like that, right?
So pushing 7 has definitely been a while. The past few months has been very much Tobe, especially with the onboarding new people and onboarding new clients, and it's exciting to see everything that we've been working on kind of come together with a larger team.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of the processes and the tools that we were using before, when it's only 3 or 4 of us, you really can't tell if it's something that's going to be scalable or manageable when it comes to adding.
It works great when it's that like handful of people, but kind of breaks once you get outside.
Yes.
And you have to rely on somebody else maybe to take over some jobs that you may have been doing or somebody else was doing.
Exactly.
Or you have to teach somebody how to kind of do those processes, and then it becomes kind of a nightmare, right? It gets hairy really quick.
Exactly. So until you have, a solid, or, at least enough people where you can tell if it's working or not, or if it's people that are just on autopilot because it's such a small team and, everyone kind of picks up the slack for each other in that situation. It's been awesome to see what has been working and what needs to be adjusted a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our clients actually mentioned that like it was a company culture question, but very similar. They were being asked like, oh, so what's your company culture like? Or what was it like early on? And he's like, well, we were like 3 dudes. How do you have company culture with like 3 people? I have no idea, So it's the same thing with process. Like you have no idea what that is, because at that point, everybody, especially when it's a small team startup, everybody's got like equal say in certain things. So everybody's got an idea they want to bring to the table or a way they want to do something. And, you have to somebody's got to bite the bullet and conform. Right.
Yes.
So, as you like to say, you wear the pants. So, I guess Andrew and I conform to your master plan.
You finally admit it in public.
Andrew's not here, by the way. So that's probably why I said no. Yeah. So okay. So let's kind of dive into that. So let's talk about the early days of Tobe Agency and some of the heartburn and it was a lot of trial and error, right? A lot of Google Sheets and Google Docs and spread and like kind of stuff everywhere. And it's still, to a certain extent, is kind of stuff everywhere, but a lot more organized.
Yeah, I think in the beginning with any small team, there's a fine line between trying to predict what you need and organizing it, or putting the cart ahead of the horse, per se, where a lot of time really should be spent trying to figure out what processes are going to need something automated in the first place.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time figuring out, what's the priority, what really does repeat, where should we spend the time and the money as far as tools and resources trying to get it automated and get it streamlined, when sometimes not every process needs that. Yeah,
and sometimes I think, and this is where I have trouble, I don't have the foresight that you and Andrew have sometimes. I get stuck where I'm like, how am I supposed to box something in that I have no idea? And this is probably just the creative side. How do you box something in that doesn't need to be in a box to begin with? Or how do you box it in when there's so many unknowns? Just take a video, for instance. I mean, there's a certain amount of stuff that we do every time, but I also know that every project we go into, no matter how tight we try to box it in, it's going to break out of that box and something's going to, for lack of a better term, screw up. So how do you think about that?
Trying not to, succumb to analysis paralysis and overthinking everything, which is so easy, especially if you've already done it once or twice. You have an idea and you don't want to repeat the same, inefficiencies as last time.
Yep.
But with every client and every project, there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be a certain level of customization. But, with each rendition, trying to document each step of the way, so when it is time to formally document the entire process, you have at least a starting point and you can recognize the trends and recognize what are the core stages.
Right. Yeah, at the core, it's always going to be X, Y, and Z, right? No matter what client or what. Yeah, totally. Okay, so let's talk about maybe some of the tools that we started off. Because,
my favorite part.
For anybody out there that has never met Kalen or heard her talk, she's a little bit, and I can't even say it, you're not really like a closet nerd about this. You're kind of like full on like embracing it, but you are a tool tester. I don't know what I know what they call it in the gaming industry,
like
junkie? Or an app junkie. Yeah. How many apps are on your phone right now?
Over 200. Over 200
apps?
Yeah.
Are they all organized?
They used to be until I realized
how many
just
pages?
Faster. Well, the first 2 have a lot of folders. Then the 3rd and 4th and 5th page are just kind of the ones that I haven't really
So now
done.
you rely heavily on the Spotlight search bar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was like, why am I?
Absolutely. Yeah, kind of funny.
No, a product hunt, I could spend hours on product hunt every day. I probably have more times than I care to admit, but product hunt is my go-to.
So yeah, in the video game world, this is a big thing, right? Video game testers, they get a copy of the video game and they just start going at it. Do you beta test?
Websites sometimes for fun.
Nice.
I love doing demos for apps. I love hearing the way that people talk about them, about how they roll them out and how they kind of onboard, new users, because I feel like a lot of programs, that's where they fall short. They make the sale or they, get the trial sign up and then they kind of leave you to flounder around and to figure out how to use it.
Yep.
But it's really interesting to see the programs that kind of take your hand and they're like, we'll help you along the way if you need it. If you don't, that's cool too. But at least they don't just, take your money and...
Yeah. So 50% of the battle is developing a great tool. The other 50% is
retaining.
How do you like manage the customer once they're on board, right? It's funny because that's our business in a nutshell, right? We sign a client and then that's the, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, it's the hard part sometimes, but the harder part is actually keeping them happy and retaining the promises that you've made and following through and delivering the product, right?
Yeah, because with marketing agencies, with apps, it's a dime a dozen for all of that. Like especially productivity tools and note-taking apps and project management tools. If you don't like something, you can easily go out, find another one.
Yep, SaaS tools, right?
Yeah, in 2 seconds. So it's all about making it work for the user.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. A lot of people, I'm sure, when they're testing these tools, they're just like, oh, is it pretty? Oh, does it do what I want? And then they're kind of like, after that, they're like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
But when you actually need help and support, is it there?
Yep. And can you figure out how to make it work for you? Because none of them are going to be like a silver bullet for your situation. But if you don't fully understand how to make the features work for you, you are going to play around with it for a little bit and then be like, all right, this doesn't work for me. And then move on to the next. But that might be because you weren't you didn't get the full information on how to make it work for you.
Yeah, totally.
You don't understand how it all connects the dots in itself.
Right, and that's actually a great segue. So let's talk about some of the tools that we did try. And I mean, we said this a couple minutes ago, but so let's try to talk about like some of the ones that we tried that we thought were that silver bullet at first. We're like, oh, this is it. We're good.
So project management tool is number one because we recognize the need for organizing internal tasks as well as client tasks, especially as we started growing as a team and growing, the number of clients we had and the number of projects that were active at any given time. But
to some extent, sorry to interrupt, we actually use it as an HR tool as well, which is an interesting, that's something interesting that I never even thought about using. And I, to see you guys build it out like that has been really cool.
Yeah, anything that, our team touches that requires a follow-up or just a completion date or anything like that, we heavily rely on, the project management tools. What are all the trials that we went through, I think it boiled down to how everyone uses it slightly different and everyone has a preferred view. Everyone has a preferred method of how they go through the information and tasks that they're assigned to, as well as how they organize their own projects. So a lot of the tools we started with initially only offered 1 or 2 views, which might be great for some of us, but I think one of the hardest part about rolling out a task management system is getting everyone on board and using it in a way that doesn't create more work for different individuals.
So talk about the views, because somebody out there who's listening for the first time and who's never really dove into a project management tool might think of, well, what do you mean by views? Is it something I'm physically looking at, or you're talking about the way the stream comes in when you see?
So right now we use a tool called ClickUp, which we tried probably like a year and a half ago. And at that time it was still relatively new. We liked it.
To be fair, we were pretty relatively new to that as well.
We were.
We probably weren't ready for it at that point.
No, we were not. We were really impressed with the interface and how it seemed pretty straightforward but robust enough for more complex projects. But they were also new in their roadmap. While their roadmap looked great, they hadn't released a lot of the features that we were looking for. We revisited it probably in December of this past year and decided that it was worth a shot again. They made all these updates. It looked awesome. And thankfully, it's worked out. It's the first time our team has really kind of embraced.
Yeah, I think the whole team is actually kind of, at least the core team. I mean, obviously, as new people come in, they kind of have to embrace it because it's what we have going as kind of like our Bible right now. But yeah, so going back to the views, so explain, so we'll get back into some of the ones that we've tried before that, where we kind of were like, okay, this isn't going to work, and we'll talk why, but talk about the views and ClickUp and why that's one of the main features that we like.
Offer 3 primary views. There's the calendar view. So anything that's assigned with a due date would appear on what looks like
exactly
a
like a calendar, right? Anything you're used to, like iCal, Google Calendar, even like a tabletop calendar, it looks just like that.
Exactly. So you can see, you can filter down to, a week view or the next month or the past month and see what was due and when, which some people, it's a lot easier to plan out, or map out different due dates if you can see it on a calendar, because that's what we're used to looking at on a day-to-day basis. There's also a list view, which is slightly similar to a Excel or spreadsheet view where it's line by line. And then there is the board view, which is a Kanban card view, which is similar to Trello. But it takes, all 3 views take the same information and just presents it in a different way because everyone likes to take in information.
Digest the information a lot different. Yeah, totally. Yeah, the calendar view for me was like, okay, I'm sold because I know exactly what I'm looking at. I can line it up with stuff that's coming up, and I can make sure that I'm on time and things like that.
Yeah, no, it's great. I feel like a lot of project management tools, for whatever reason, do not offer a calendar.
Yeah, that is strange.
Yeah, you have to do a separate integration, and usually they'll offer a sync with maybe a Google Calendar or an iCal or something, or it's not a two-way sync and it just pushes the information. Right. The fact that it's one of the prominent options, it lets people really customize how they work and what works best for them without disrupting how the projects are laid out.
Let's go back in the time machine and talk about some of the projects.
Hot tub time machine.
Yeah, hot tub. No, I prefer a DeLorean actually. I actually saw this funny tweet the other day. It said, "I take my DeLorean out from time to time." But anyway,
nice.
Back to the Future nerds out there. Yeah, that one's for you. So let's talk about I don't want to call them failures because they're not failures. It just wasn't a good fit, right? It's just like,
they worked at the time, where we realized it's really hard. See, I'm the first to admit that I'll get so excited about an app or something for maybe the first week and tell everyone about it. Right. And then the more I use it, I'm like, never mind.
Shiny new toy syndrome, right? All the bells and whistles. Oh, it's got this feature, and this feature.
Until you actually dive in.
I do that with email apps on my phone. Like I've switched probably 4 email apps within the year. I finally settled on one that I'm like, okay, this is it. I can't stand the Google Gmail app. And I have calendars that are outside of Google, so I can't sync them anyway, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. Then I hate the Apple calendar or mail app, which was supposed to get redesigned but didn't. But yeah, anyway, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, you're like, oh, there's a new feature. I love it. Let's sign up.
Yep. So we started with, Basecamp.
We did. That's right. I forgot all about it.
It was Basecamp, which I tried. I just couldn't.
Yeah, Basecamp. You know what? I think it's good for 1 or 2 man teams.
Yeah.
And there's probably teams out there that are better, that are bigger, that do use it for them. But for the way that we were thinking about things, I think it was good for 1 or 2 people.
Exactly.
And then you outgrow it. We outgrew it pretty quick.
Yeah. It's very straightforward, which is great. Sometimes you just need to keep track of due dates and for a single project or two when you're juggling multiple projects.
It's a great freelancer tool.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We haven't used it in a year and a half, so I'm sure they've made quite a few updates.
Had to, right? It's a super competitive market, so
yeah, definitely. And there are a lot of teams that are able to use it and make it fit for them. It was just almost too straightforward. We needed something that could be customized a little bit more. After that, we went to Rike, which is something that I used previously, which Jared did not like.
I hated Rike. You know what? To be honest with you, it's that whole I love being able to customize. a developer, but I love the ability to know that I can like code my own thing sometimes if I need like a tool or whatever. But the customization in that thing is way too much. I think it's great for probably like a 600 person company or, you know, 100 person company or when you have that many people and you need super customized specific things. But other than that, I did not like it.
I was really crossing my fingers for because we'd used it.
You were really familiar with it,
I was
right?
familiar with it. And it's definitely, if you're looking for something robust and something that has more traditional like Gantt charts.
Yeah, it's got Gantt charts and stuff.
And dependencies and templates and all of that. It makes sense. And you can do forms with it. And
I think it just got too granular almost. Like, I feel like sometimes we don't need to get down to the grain of sand.
Right.
The sand pile is okay, you know? And I think that tool again, but when you have like, you know, a million dependencies, if you're building a car, great. It's probably really important to have all those dependencies.
Right.
But yeah, when like 6 to 8 people are touching it, you're going to get lost. At least that's how I looked at it.
Yeah. And it's about finding that, like you said earlier, it's about finding that common or, you know, compromise.
Right.
Like no tool's going to be perfect for everybody, but everyone should at least feel somewhat comfortable working in it or just know how to get in and get out and check off what they need to do. Maybe they won't embrace all the features, but as long as everyone's on the same page with how to use it, and that's part of like the guidelines and stuff that we could talk about in a minute, as you know, how to actually roll it out. So Reich was a little bit too robust, and then we went to Trello, which I tried really hard.
Yeah, Trello, again, it's kind of like Basecamp. It's super basic, right? It's straightforward. I mean, it does have a lot of those power-up features, which is whatever they call it, power-ups.
They do, but it's limiting too.
You've got to add on a lot of extra effort, and then you have to invite other people. They have to have that extra power on to kind of use the same features.
Yep. They only had the Kanban board view.
Yeah,
so,
and they had there's a calendar view, but you had to add it separately, right? That was kind of a pain in the butt.
Or show it as a third party app.
Right. You know what I didn't like about Trello was the notifications.
The notifications were horrible. That was awful.
I didn't like them, and it was like once you cleared something, you couldn't go back and find it. And honestly, I probably shouldn't be admitting this because I'll probably get like beat behind the scenes, but I live by the notifications. Like if I haven't read it, that means I haven't checked it. That's my to-do list. Notifications in email. If I haven't read it, that just means I haven't done it yet. So I heavily rely on the notifications and being able to go back and look at them.
And you couldn't customize it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because everyone, with any program or tool or whatnot, the notifications in the beginning, you get notified about everything, and you should be able to then, as you get used to it, customize how you receive them based on the way that you work. And you just couldn't do that at the time. Maybe you might now. We just needed different views and different ways of organizing information because you also couldn't see everything from a high level. So you only could look at one board at a time. There was no bird's eye view. So as an agency who had multiple clients, and if each client has its own board, you only can see one client at a time, which is not very sufficient.
Right. Yeah, so in my past career working in post-production, I worked on commercials and films that, some films were like 200 shots. So I've worked in some seriously robust project management tools, but for whatever reason, like Reich and Trello both were like missing on the, and for the creative side, I guess it's not as important as it is for, it's, I don't know, there's not as many steps, I would say, right? There's a lot larger steps, and then there's a lot of time in between. There's like a review time, but it doesn't need like 6 steps underneath it, right? So I don't know. Yeah, Trello was really weird. I tried to like it also. Notifications on like when people would move cards, like sometimes I wouldn't get those, and I'm like, where'd that card go?
Right.
And then it just disappeared, and then I'd find out like, Andrew moved this like 3 days ago, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even get a notification that it was still due.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
So I think that is cool. That is kind of cool about ClickUp. It has that view and that style, but the notifications in ClickUp are actually pretty good.
Yeah, they get very granular. You can get everything and get bombarded depending on the number of tasks that you're watching or part of. You can get bombarded, but you can also choose not to be.
Right.
You can choose to get some email notifications.
But even then, I do like the way they present the stream. Even when I'm just watching a task and, I'm not really involved with it, I can just at least read up. And it looks like an email chain. It looks familiar.
Yes.
So it's easy to read. You can see the date. And then you're like, oh, I don't need to know this. You just turn it off.
Exactly. They actually are about to release their 2.0, which we're going to...
When this podcast is being recorded, it may have already come out by...
Yes, this is true.
By the time you hear it, it may have come out.
But their new inbox is really cool because it allows for greater customization for the person.
Spoiler.
But it's awesome. It's awesome because if you want to organize it a different way, it lets you. So I think ClickUp, not only is there customer service, and this is not sponsored by ClickUp in any way, shape, or form.
So, but hey, ClickUp. Oh, seriously? Was that one or this one? Oh, there goes Siri. Man, I hit do not disturb. Anyway, so back to that. ClickUp, if you're listening, please sponsor us at Run with Toby. We will gladly test all your new tools.
We are big fans.
Yeah. Just like a 15% discount. I'm down.
And to be completely honest, like their pricing is fair for the amount of features. They did release another tier, so I mean, I'm sure that it will change over time. But their pricing is fair for the amount of features that you get and the amount of customization. I think that they really speak and recognize that people digest information different ways, and you can't only have one or two ways of filtering information with views and jamming it down people's throats, because if your team is, just like with the other ones we tried, if your team is not really on board, especially for small businesses, you're going to move on to the next tool.
Totally, yeah.
And they're really good about letting people work the way they work, and it shouldn't be disruptive to your day. It should support your day.
Right. It shouldn't be something that you're like annoyed by,
or take more time to figure out like, oh, now where does it go, or where is this? Like you should be able to set up different, standard views for yourself as well as for your team, and just use it to complement what you're doing so you don't forget anything.
Yep. Totally. Okay. So let's move aside from project management for a second. Let's talk about some of the other tools that we use. Andrew and I have talked about this, not at like full length, but we've definitely mentioned, we use Google Suite and we use Confluence and we use, the Adobe Suite and things like that. But let's talk about the other like productivity tools that we use to kind of manage some of the back end stuff. So I think Confluence is a great example for that. Like, honestly, I don't use Confluence.
Wow.
Disclaimer, but you guys know that. Yeah. I don't use it that often because I honestly, I'm not the one documenting things. So
Confluence is what we consider our internal wiki.
Yep.
We started out by using Google Sheets to document things, but it's just cumbersome to document in different separate files.
Yeah, and it gets lost really quick. You're like, you go to your drive and you have a million files. You're like, shit, where did that file go? What did I call it?
Like, it's hard to connect things.
Yeah, unless you're really good at like naming conventions, you're on top of it.
We're working on it.
Yeah, we're working on that, right? Which is a big thing. That's a big tip for any new startup agencies out there or any other agencies that are just struggling. Naming conventions, and from the creative side, I can tell you that is like everything.
Yep, especially, naming conventions for creative, and if you're producing a lot of written content.
And if you're just putting out a lot of files, just a file system is really, really important.
Exactly. I 100% agree. Confluence, I have a love-hate relationship with Confluence, not gonna lie. I think it's great as an internal wiki. We use the cloud version. From my understanding, the server version is a hell of a lot better. They offer a lot more add-ons.
Sure, but it's all hosted locally, though.
Right, it's for enterprises.
Yeah, and I would say if you need documentation that's secure, or a lot more secure, I would say that's probably the better way to go. But it's also a lot more expensive.
No, exactly. It is. It's for the very like global big businesses. Right. It's just that the marketplace apps and add-ons that make Confluence as robust as it is speaks more to is available more to the server users.
Sure.
We use the cloud version, which I can understand is, for the smaller businesses, and it makes it accessible to us, which is awesome. It just doesn't have as many features as the server version.
What would be some of the features that you'd like to see come to if you could have like one of those features, what's one of the cool ones?
It's being able to, so essentially it's a bunch of different pages that you can, nest under each other in different spaces and all of that. So it's almost like having Word docs that can be as long as you want on one page, but then the macros that would be nice to have is connecting all the information on the different pages. Because a lot of the times when you create, like we use it for meeting agendas.
Right.
Once the meeting agenda is saved in there, it's good to have to reference, but it'd be awesome if you were able to do more with the information on there, maybe to specify that you want it, grouped with other pieces of information that have similar tags for that page.
It becomes more like a real wiki.
Yeah.
Where you've got
without being so manual
linking
about it.
And things like that. Yeah.
And it just, there are options for the cloud version, just not as many. It'd be better if we could make it more useful after it's on the page.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. No, it does. I mean, like I said, I use it because I end up reading up all the documentation, but I don't write a ton in it. So I know as a text document, it's super robust. So you can add tables and you can add, all kinds of cool markups. And
I think the best one that we use is the Google Drive one.
Yeah.
Because you can embed an existing Google Drive, Google Doc or Google Sheet and make it editable within the Confluence page.
Right, so you don't have to go, you're not going back and forth between apps, right? Yeah, that is cool. Okay, so let's talk about an app that kind of works behind the scenes that we use. I don't know, and I'm not even sure how much we're actually using it inside of Tobe as much as we are for our clients, but like Zapier is a really cool productivity automation app. And for anybody out there who doesn't really know what it is, it's an API to API connector. Essentially, you can write like an if then or if this then that type of statement. If this happens, a chain reaction happens through this app it's connecting apps essentially. Maybe talk about, how that's been kind of instrumental with especially clients. Cause I know, like I said, I'm not sure how much we're using it internally, but I know we are using it heavily for clients.
I think as a good basic example for how we use it is the social posts.
Oh yeah, that is a good example. Yep.
For Slack, we use Slack for, internal and external communication, but we rely heavily on it for internal communication among the team, especially because we have so many remote workers. And a Zap was set up so every time there's a new post to Instagram or Facebook to one of the Tobe accounts, it sends out a message to one of our channels to let the team know that there's a new post, you should go like it.
Right.
So you don't have to hope that you see it when you're scrolling through later on in the day.
Right. That's a very basic.
Yeah, as an example.
Version.
Very basic.
That is a cool.
But being able to connect, so the larger apps do offer a lot of integrations with the other larger apps. Slack offers a lot of different apps that it will connect with without you having to really do anything.
Yep.
But for a lot of the smaller apps, and even just because there's so many of them, if your tool stack doesn't offer one of those native integrations, Zapier is a great way to go to connect them because, I'm sure every company, as they grow, add more and more tools, and more tools. But if they're not working together. Right.
And ultimately what it does is it saves development. So you don't have to hire a developer to come write this bridge, essentially, to connect these certain things. Being that we're a HubSpot agency, obviously we use it heavily a lot. With HubSpot's great. With Zapier, you can do a ton of stuff back and forth with it. I know that we're using it for some clients in HubSpot.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than people think it is to set it up.
Yeah, it's pretty click and play. I mean, there's definitely some more robust features inside it.
As long as you.
But that's like Google
read
Sheets.
The instructions.
Right. But Google Sheets, you can code in Google Sheets and no one knows that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned Slack. Mm-hmm. I think Slack is a lifesaver.
It is, but it's becoming the email that was before Slack.
Is it?
I think so. As far as the amount of, our company is pretty good at minimizing the number of emails. So I haven't ever felt like, oh, my inbox is out of control.
Right.
Like we reserve it for, yes, we reserve it for, important internal communication that's a little bit more formal. And then client communication. But a lot of our clients are also on Slack. So rather than checking email constantly for little updates or even conversations, like we reserve Slack for, the one-off questions or even to debate something or, ask our client, like, could you send over, your new logo or something like that. But I do feel like it very, very easily can become what email used to be as far as the brains of everything.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And if you don't set those guidelines, and we've obviously clearly laid out guidelines internally on what communications belong where. But if you don't set those guidelines, especially on the client-facing side, I can see it becoming. It's like giving your phone number to your client, and now all of a sudden they're text messaging you like all the time. So
and setting the expectations.
And the worst thing about it is everybody can see it. So if you don't respond fast enough, then everybody knows your respond time. But yeah, I think for the most part, I mean, there's been a couple clients that, get a little squirrely, but for the most part, it's pretty respectful. A lot of the clients, it's new to them, so they're not always on it like we are, obviously. But I think it's great internally. It's changed, obviously, since, like you said, a lot of us work remotely, or a lot of the team works remotely, so it's changed. Like it cuts down meetings sometimes. It cuts down, obviously emails. And you can get answers right away. And especially if you do group channels, like multiple people can chime in and answer, and it's way better than a text message. And you can make phone calls on it and video calls. And like, I use it a lot because I'm like, hey, sometimes I'm like, Zara, I need to ask you a question. Can you just jump on Slack real quick? And I'll just hit her on a phone call like that, rather than having to, set up a meeting or, whatever. So I think as an internal tool, it's definitely pretty life-changing.
Absolutely. No, I'm a big fan of Slack. It's just making sure that people use it in a way that's productive.
Right.
And if it's important information about something that has to get done, we've set up guidelines to say that should go in ClickUp or whatever project management tool is being used at the time. Because it's very easy, just like text, for things to get buried.
Yeah, of course.
If you don't...
But the search functionality is a lot better than text.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then they do have so many integrations set up where we can create ClickUp tasks from a message directly within Slack. We can add a message as a comment to ClickUp from Slack.
Confluence connects to it.
Yep.
Google Drive connects to it. Yeah, it's pretty robust in that way.
Yeah.
We have our own emojis.
And there's
cool.
the Giphy. Or Giphy.
Oh, yeah. GIF. There's tons of cats flying around between you and Oz and whoever else, right?
Yep.
All right. So what other tools are we using right now that are like kind of game changers? What do you think?
Let's see. So Confluence.
I mean, I don't want to get into like, we use Zoom for like video calls, but that's not game changing. There's like a million video conference tools that we use.
I mean, as far as time tracking, Toggle is our...
Yeah, actually, let's talk about ClickUp and time tracking, because I think that's a really interesting thing that they're taking on.
Yeah.
And they're combining in with their product, because that's not usually in a project management tool. That's usually separate. So
it's usually an integration of some sort.
Yeah.
But ClickUp integrates with Harvest, Toggle, all the big name time tracking tools. 'Cause, I assume they recognize that that's probably what people are using.
Right.
But they do have a native version with all their plans, I think. Could be wrong. But where every task allows the ability for
there's literally a stopwatch.
Recording time, and then you can pull the information from there. So
I think it's great because, one, it cuts down on like extra licenses. Obviously, from a cost standpoint, like Andrew and I always like talk about this, and we always kind of joke around, but literally you can $9.99 your company to death.
Oh yeah.
With like the amount of like apps that you can subscribe to, or services, or this and that. It's like it's $9.99 here, it's $9.99, whatever the prices are. Obviously, that's just like a round price, but I think so. One, cost cutting is great. Two, for me, like tracking time becomes a task. Like I'm like, damn, I forgot to track time again. So just to have it in my checklist of like, okay, I got to go and look at the task that I'm going to do. I can just click the stopwatch within the task. That makes it a lot easier. And then three, like onboarding, that's just one less step of onboarding that you have to do. You still have to teach somebody how to use it,
right,
but it's one less like account that you have to create. And the time tracking apps, obviously it's not for everybody, and we do have to use Toggle for external and internal time tracking, but I do think that's pretty game changing. And if they really start to build that out, I think, especially,
it seems like the direction that they're going in is to be more of a resource support tool as well, not just tasks, but for resource planning and the people aspect and, where time is being spent and how to allocate projects to your people resources and based on who's available and how much everybody has on their plate. So the time tracking part and the fact that you can add people as guests and be
that's
very
cool too.
granular.
And you can just even to like one task.
One task. It doesn't have to be to a project.
Can you add a guest to a subtask, or is it just a task?
I believe you can add to a subtask.
To a subtask?
As well. So you can get super granular with who sees what.
But it's good because it's it's privacy. There's obviously a lot of stuff that we sign NDAs on, and we can't always share everything. Even if you're a freelancer and you're on that project, you may not be privy to all of the knowledge on the project. So that is really cool that they allow that.
Yeah, and then that way, any of the core Tobe people probably have other projects that may not be, or working on stuff for being in meetings that might not be in ClickUp to record on a task. But for the contractors or people who are coming in just to work on a specific task, they just need to track their time directly on the task because that's all they're working on.
Right.
So it makes it very straightforward.
My favorite feature of ClickUp is dark mode. I'm just kidding. But that is a cool feature. No, I honestly I was probably out of the three of us, I will say, because obviously I'm not going to count everybody past that because we've kind of built the process and then we teach them the process. But out of the three of us, I was probably the most resistant against project management in general. And I understand why it's necessary. I'm just not, my mind doesn't think like you guys. Like I'm not linear. I'm not logical in a lot of ways.
You're creative.
I'm very much all over the place. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense most of the time. And then at the end it comes together. But ClickUp, I actually love, and it works great for what we're doing. I think, you've done a great job of like laying it out and teaching the team how to use it, which I know has not been easy. So that brings us into the next part. Let's talk about Rollout. Like, what should people think about? You got your project management tool, you got time tracking, you got your communication tools all kind of like set in place and you feel good about it. How do you think about rolling out? Like what are the steps to, cause there's a difference, right? When you're starting from scratch, it's really easy. You're just like, okay, we're going to start from scratch. But like once you're kind of in motion and you're kind of like handing off or onboarding new people in the middle of it, it kind of gets a little tricky.
Rolling out a new tool in general or rolling it out to new?
Well, rolling out a new tool, but then also rolling it out to new people.
So rolling out a new tool, identifying what are the most important things we're looking for, just because, obviously there's so many different options. And like I said, it's easy to get really excited about something new because you think it checks all the boxes, but nothing is going to check all the boxes.
Right.
But acknowledging and kind of, making sure that you're looking for X, Y, and Z to accomplish X, Y, and Z so you're not distracted by the shiny things.
Right.
And then testing it for those goals and doing a small task if it was a task management or project management, rolling out a small scale project, maybe to a small team to see if it
makes
actually
sense
works.
At all. Right.
And get other people involved without bringing on everyone, but at least to see with multiple people, and how it might interact with other tools that you have, like what integrations are available. You don't want to, roll out a new tool and find that it actually doesn't even have a Zap for it. Just keeping that type of thing in mind and just knowing, what you're looking for in the ultimate long run. If it's something that is only going to do one specific job, might be a little bit different, but it needs to be flexible. It needs to, work with the type of people that are going to be working with it and not against it.
Right. Yeah, it's a two-way street for sure.
Mm-hmm. And taking the time to understand it because no tool's gonna. Right,
but I think it was really smart in the approach you took, especially with ClickUp, because we had so much already built into Trello at the time. I think it was really smart how you were like, okay, Andrew, you try it first. Jared, you try it next, and then we'll roll out, maybe Oz or at the time Jay or whoever, and so I think that was really smart to kind of go one by one. The other thing I think was smart was the test project that you set us up on and you kind of made us, that Oz still hasn't completed, by the way.
I'm waiting.
I think that was a really smart way to kind of show off the features, but also get people to actually use the features, except for Oz. I thought that was a really smart way on how to roll that out. So that was pretty successful.
And defining that every app or tool is going to have its own terminology in the way that it refers to things within the actual program.
Right.
You need to define, before you roll it out, define what it means to your team and what they need to be aware of and how to use it. Like what is considered a task, what's considered a subtask, what's considered a checklist, what is considered a project versus a list. We treat, at Tobe, we treat lists and ClickUp as projects, but just so everyone is aware that that's what it's called in ClickUp.
Right.
And putting that in a document and discussing it as a team after it's been decided how it's going to be used based on kind of the trial period beforehand. Yeah. And also not rushing into rolling anything out, because we've done that before too and then realized, wait, this is not what we thought it was. Yeah, we backed ourselves into a corner. Mm-hmm. And even though everyone wants everything yesterday, which is understandable, especially as you're growing and you recognize there's a need for something and you're like, we need this now, it's going to be a lot more wasted time in the long run if you try and force it and realize you have to start over again.
Right. So quick question. How hard is it to keep 2.0 from the team right now?
Oh my gosh. So hard. I almost, I was like, I should just release it right now. Like, just click the button. It's like, it's going to be launched. And then like, I was like, on a Wednesday, that was like a Tuesday at midnight. And I was like, they're going to come in on a Wednesday and be like, what is this?
All right. So how do we, I totally skipped over the last question. So rolling this out to a new employee. Mm-hmm. I think that, at least to me, it sounds pretty self-explanatory. It just becomes like you try one thing and then you notice like, I forgot to do X, Y, and Z on this one. So the next employee, we're just going to add these steps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just documenting as you go and asking your team for feedback, and don't be so knee-jerk to change things whenever you think that, that was great feedback. Let's change all of this. Just do it in increments.
Sure.
Just to see how it might fit in with other things before you roll it out. But you should never set it and forget it. I think one of the big things is being flexible and knowing that you're building a foundation to streamline everything and all the processes, but it should also be flexible enough to work with the individual team, client, projects without forcing people to try and configure everything they're doing to fit in this like very strict standard. Yeah,
I also think it's really important that it's always a live organism. Mm-hmm. We should at least you should always treat your team, because your team is a live organism, right? Yep. It's always growing and changing. People are changing positions. People are changing in and out. People are coming in and out of the company. You're wearing multiple hats. Maybe you're getting specialized. Whatever the needs are, like the project management system should be able to flex with that as well.
Yep, and it should just have the important part is just the basic foundation. So when you're looking for something, or if a new person's being added to the team, it shouldn't look completely different as another project, even if there's some things that are more custom to that particular project. Right. And flexible enough for project leads and project managers to be able to still manage the way that works for them and works for their team without like restricting them.
Right. And I also think it's really important as far as like terminology when you're kind of like defining what means what in the to the team, that as you're onboarding new people, they either understand that up front, mm-hmm. Whether that's you're explaining it or they've done something similar, or you're laying it out in a way that they can digest it, so that they, as you're initially coming into it, they're not confused when somebody comes up and who's like, hey, by the way, I'm looking for that list. And they're like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just about the documentation. And everyone says, oh yeah, like we're going to document everything as we go. But that's hard. It's really hard to not only do it the first go around, but then to make sure that it stays updated and that someone is updating it. And it's not just one person deciding when and what gets updated. It should be a group effort, but that's taking time out from the team. But it's important. Yeah. Because everything's going to change over time, and people are going to learn from past mistakes, and there's always going to be mistakes. So
I always think about like documentation in like the poor guys who, and they probably don't do it now, but back in the day, the poor guys who had to like figure out the step-by-step process for like
manuals.
Yeah. So a manual for like Legos or like IKEA furniture. Like, who's that poor bastard that had to go there and document step by step and trial and error? Like, no.
Monk's brother. Did you watch Monk?
No.
The show?
Uh-uh.
His brother wrote
IKEA instructions?
like no, just manual like manuals for like
like
electronics and stuff because he
like anyway, that's what I always
Great
think about
show,
when
by the
that's
way.
probably why I don't like documentation. All right, cool. So damn, we're already coming up on like an hour. Crazy. All right, so how do we future-proof ourselves or think about the future? I think it's better. You can't really prove. There's no way to prove yourself, right? There's no way to do it.
You're going to go down a hole of analysis paralysis.
Right.
And I've learned at least what works for Tobe team, and because you want to save on time as far as how much time you're planning it before it actually happens. Like we always use the analogy, we're building the plane as we fly it as a startup. Any startup is.
Sure. I think even as an established company, you're still kind of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be crazy busy times with clients, some more busier than others, but you should continue to, update and revamp internal processes. Because if you're not building that foundation, when you are a much larger company, if you don't have that in place, it's going to deteriorate.
Oh yeah, the house is on fire.
I think we've all worked for that company who either didn't think it was important in the beginning because their team was so small, and then, all of a sudden saw a boom in growth, and then they're like...
Yeah, it's one thing to build a plane while you're flying, but it's another thing to build it while it's crashing.
Yes.
There's
because that's
totally
when the
different...
the knee-jerk decisions come in, and you're screwed.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But I also think you have to recognize that it's evolving, and you can't predict everything. And if you're not sure where to start, just start writing everything down and just go from there. It's better to start broad and then organize it than try to force things into categories when you don't even know what the categories are yet.
Or just do a bunch of heads down work and then you're like, how did I get here?
Or when you have to train people and you're like, well, it's all in my head.
Right.
Or if someone leaves.
That is the worst. Yeah, that is the worst.
And they held all the information in their head and now they're not there.
Yep. And so that's actually a really good point. So for everybody that may not know, Andrew is a proud new father, and part of he's not here right now with us during this podcast just because he's attending to his beautiful baby girl right now, which is awesome. But that was a thing he was really scared of, he's like, I need to take some time off. Like I need to make sure that I document everything that, I do right now to get it out of my head so that I can tell the team so the team can keep running with, and move things forward. And he did, obviously he did an amazing job at that, as he would. And it's been super helpful for the rest of the team to have that. So, that is a huge part of why documentation is important, just to get it out of your head.
Yeah.
Just to share the information for that day that, hey, you may not be there.
And you know what? Even the, let's see, what is like Loom or having some type of screen recording, like very accessible screen recorder. So if you want to just show someone
Soapbox.
How you do it, it's a click of a button and it saves it as a file and you can pass it on without having to set up a call and a screen share or having to explain it. And it's a really quick and easy way to do that.
I'll go ahead and plug these guys. So Wistia, which is the video player of choice by us and, obviously a lot of agencies, and just a lot of marketing or website, it's great website tech for analytics on your videos that you're putting out on your website.
They have a great online conference thing.
Yep, they do.
CouchCon, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it is pretty cool. But they have a new secondary product that they released early this year or end of last year, something like that, called Soapbox. And it's exactly that. You can screen record, so you can see your face and show whatever's on your screen at the same time, and you switch. And it's really easy for people that have no idea how to do video editing or screen recording or anything. It's super simple to use. Great tool for stuff like that.
Yeah, it saves up so much time if you're trying.
For me, that I'm gonna do
steps.
that every time over writing it down. I will just say that.
Or explaining it to someone who's like, I have no idea what you're talking about because I don't see it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So last thing before we wrap it up here, what are maybe some tips or takeaways that you could pass along to upcoming agencies or agencies that are probably in the process of figuring these things out?
To start thinking about it early. I mean, it always varies with the actual agency about when you make it a primary focus on the operations. I mean, we get it in the very beginning. You're just trying to get clients. You're trying to get a cash flow to pay for all these apps and tools. And you probably have a limited people resources available. So as a team that wears many hats, why would you want to take away from billable hours if they're working on internal stuff when you don't even have the cash flow to support that yet.
Totally.
So it's identifying kind of along the way like just documenting on the side, what you're working on, what is important to automate first, what you need from each type of tool, and just gradually in the very beginning start figuring that out before making a huge investment, but also recognizing that it should be a focus sooner than later. It's just what a fine line for a lot.
Do you think it's important to appoint like one person in charge of that?
Someone to drive it, absolutely.
Right.
But it's with small teams especially, it should be a team effort for feedback, because if one person is not on board and very resistant to what's being rolled out, and there's always going to be someone who doesn't love it, but you should figure out ways to make it work in different, like at least compromise in ways and hear them out, because the way that they're thinking might actually be more efficient than the way that you originally thought.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from that is just listen to your team.
Yeah.
Like obviously as the leader or the person in charge of this process, you may have one mindset, but it's not always the all mindset, right? So I think, listening to your team is definitely a key takeaway.
Yep, and just taking the time to try out.
Yeah,
different
that's
tools.
the next thing. Just try a bunch.
Try the tool, figure out what you need, what's the priority. Don't try and roll out everything all at once, because that would be a cluster.
Every one of them, most of these apps, they give you a free trial at some point, or there's a freemium model that you can at least test out, or they'll set up a call and like demo it for you, right?
Demos. Take the time for good demos, though.
Be careful, don't get, paralyzed by all the,
bells and whistles.
Yeah, of just looking at it.
Just have a plan, know what the goal is, what's important, what you're trying to achieve with that tool, and, don't be distracted by the shiny things.
Yeah, which is really hard because a lot of them,
really hard. I mean,
a lot of them do have some really cool features, but it's not always what's gonna sell. It's just like a car, right? Do you really need like 13 backup cameras? No, of course not. One is probably gonna be. Cool. All right. Well, on that note, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for
This
having
was
me.
awesome to kind of expand on the topic that we kind of touched on a little bit
I'll
long
talk about
ago.
this all day, and I'm sure.
Good. I'm sure we'll have an update at some point.
Absolutely.
Cool. So thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, check us out on social at Run with Toby. You can subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google, Spotify, or anywhere you find a podcast, and we will see you on the next one.